Hello, my name is Brian James Shanley, and you are joining me at the beginning of part 2 of what's going to necessarily evolve to become a series. This is a project that I have both enjoyed doing and hated at the exact same moment. Picture simultaneously loving something and hating something. When I was a young Bible student, when I knew that God had set me apart for the work of evangelizing the lost, equipping the saints, defending the gospel, glorifying Christ in the community by way of doing good works as evidence of and motivated by a saving faith or trust in the person, words, and work of Jesus Christ, of confronting and cross-examining non-Christian and anti-Christian ideologies, philosophies, religions, worldviews, attitudes, etc., in the name of and for the honor of Jesus Christ. When I knew I was set aside for this particular calling, this task, I remember learning at the feet of some very decent older men from previous generations, and I remember hanging out in the Christian community, trying to learn what was happening, what was current in terms of, where things were headed. And also hanging out in some of the non-Christian world because I had to go behind enemy lines to find out why people held to the non-Christian views that they did and where they were coming from so that I might provide an adequate response to these things. I dreamt of and I got excited the way a young guy does about the future, about the possibilities. Whether it be the books that I would need to write one day, whether it would be the recordings I would need to make, the radio broadcasts I would end up doing, the speeches that I would speak, and just the, overall the geographical travels that I would need to carry this wonderful saving message to a human race that it's on its way to hell. One of the scenarios that never crossed my mind was that the Holy Spirit would not leave me alone until I put forth a recording having to do with God is most glorified and Christ is most magnified when I put one of my other brothers under the bus publicly in order to become friends with the non-Christians and to establish myself as an authority that I'm not. That is the position that one of my heroes of the faith, James R. White, has taken in his efforts to become known as one of the defenders of the Christian faith over and against the world religion of Islam. Dr. Robert A. Morey has been involved in Islamic studies in one form or another since the 1960s. You can see in his writings in the 1970s and the 1980s that he is warning about things that might happen on this North American continent that during the Reagan Revolution and the decade of excess seemed insane. They're here every day, and you can't tell he didn't write it last week. He saw today coming. He's the scholar that cracked open to the Western audience, made them actually give a crap about the Hadith, which Muslims refer to as the second revelation, on the same level as the Qur'an. As a matter of fact, there are many passages in the Qur'an that you could not understand or interpret without the hadith coming along to provide the historical context of the particular surah in view. Robert Morey is the scholar that opened these things up. It has earned him acclaim. He has debated some of these so-called champions of Islam He challenged others who ran from him like cowards because they knew they were going to be destroyed and that their attacks on Christianity were going to be exposed as garbage. James R. White has a great ministry, spent much of it debating atheists, debating Dave Hunt 1,000 times about whether or not Calvinism or Arminianism was a true look at the sovereignty of God in human history and in salvation. He's done a lot of great work on Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and things. But truth be told, if you look at the Alpha and Omega website, published works, recorded works, you are hard-pressed to find anything having to do with Islam that can be dated to September 10th, 2001 and previous, i.e. the falling of the towers sounded the alarm to Jim White, and he decided he wanted to get involved in that segment of apologetics that dealt with providing Christian answers to Islam. When he arrived, he found out that there were several of us already here, and we offered him our hand and said, come on up to the top of the mountain, we've been waiting for you. Come alongside us, welcome to the fight. He decided, no, I don't want to be involved in the fight, I want to take the fight over. Who's the top dog? Robert Morey. So how can I be established as the top dog? Robert Morey needs to be discredited, brought down, whatever, so that in the absence of A, B will come in and fill the vacuum. That's kind of my gut. This nearly 25-minute rant that he goes on about Dr. Robert A. Morey is pretty much a transparent attempt to anyone who studied Islam in the United States prior to the towers coming down, and we knew who, sort of the pecking order, if you will. This is a transparent attempt to basically attack the motives, the character, the personality, and the scholarship of, when you think about it, a man upon whom James R. White sits on his shoulders. So part one in this series was simply an introduction, as in if you've been walking around in your evangelical Christian world not knowing that underneath there lies this particular controversy, I'm kind of introducing you to its existence. That's part one. And part two, which we have now, it's going to be the actual playing of James R. White's words. The whole reason that I'm even doing this is because for those of you everyday new Christian minds and new non-Christian minds who just want facts, and even new Muslim minds who are seeking an alternate worldview, viewpoint, etc., you enter the market of Christian responses to Islam via books, debates, etc. And I don't want somebody, their willingness, their suggestibility to hear and possibly benefit from the work and the ministry of Dr. Robert A. Morey, particularly his debates, particularly his books, because they are second to none. And I would hate to see that interfere with you possibly tapping a resource that might help you in your quest for truth. So as I've said before, do you think I want to be sitting here doing this? No. I hate that it even is necessary. But it is a necessary evil. I'm willing to do it. I recorded most of this a year ago. I sat on it for a year. No apology has come from James R. White. No retraction has come from James R. White. And so now I have no problem making this public. Let's look at the words of James R. White as he, on national radio. Internet radio, if you think about it, is global. So on global radio, before a potential audience of 7 billion or whatever it is, you got to understand something, brothers and sisters. During the short time that God has granted me the privilege of heralding and stewarding and carrying the gospel message and defending it, I got to tell you that I've run into scenarios where there'd be another preacher, sometimes a friend, sometimes an acquaintance, where I would hear something that didn't jive, that didn't sound like the classic Christian position that the church has held to and bled for and suffered for and drowned for and burned for 2,000 years. That it seemed heterodox, an attack on the character of God or the nature of God or the character of Christ or the sufficiency of the work of Christ or something along those lines. What I would always do is I would give a brother a call and I'd say, hey, I heard something, and based on where I'm coming from, I interpret it to be this way. Is this what you meant? Please tell me it ain't so. I would give them a chance to tell me yay or nay. Sometimes they would say, yeah, I meant it that way, and here's why. Blah, 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 blah. They'd quote some garbage. Fine. Sometimes they'd say, well, darn, I can see how I totally worded that in a very irresponsible way. I need to take a mic and correct that the first chance I get. But the point is, what I never did is I never got onto a stage in front of people, much less on the radio, much less on internet radio, and started talking about the person's motives and scholarship and capabilities and competence when I didn't have all the facts. I've never done that. It would take a lot to motivate me to want to do that. There would have to be something going on in my mind or heart that would take away the necessary steps of levels in between the discovery of this seemingly weird thing to the publicity of it. And one of the levels in between was I would literally get a hold of that person. And for me to even be concerned enough to get in front, because you know I'm a confronter of things that are non-Christian, it would have to be something that would, when spoken from a Christian microphone, would have to be a direct contradiction to the Word of God that results in a non-Christian or even anti-Christian teaching that negatively impacts both the eternal destiny and the life lived. In other words, the end result of following this teaching has to take you to hell on the other side of the grave, or make you live like a drug addict, pervert, liar, thief, etc. on this side of the grave. If it was going to do destruction to your spiritual life, your personal relationship with God, and I'd given the other guy the chance to explain himself or to retract, then it would be necessary for me to publicly confront and condemn with all authority of God. But it takes a long time to reach that point. And here my guy Jim White just goes from 0 to 200 miles an hour with no levels in between. And so I'm very disappointed by that. But also the stretch. I'm going to allow Jim White to speak in his own words. You, if you have any discernment, he who has an ear, let him listen to what the heck is going on. And he who has a brain and a mind and an intellect, let them catch what's going on here, because I don't think I have to spell it out for you. Here we go.
Twice I have received a question, both at the same church in Houston. And this individual asked me a question. I remember he asked me it privately, well, sort of private, after I gave a talk on Islam a couple of years ago. And then he gave it more publicly. And I linked to my talks there in Houston, so you may hear my response to it. There are only a few times that I have responded to a question as strongly as I did both times that I was asked this question. And sometimes I feel badly about that, but sometimes there's a time to speak strongly. And what the gentleman asked me was, in essence, and now I know where this was coming from, and that's what surprises me. I just discovered where this came from. Basically what he asked was, I've read that the best way to deal with Islam would be to nuke the Kaaba, drop a nuclear bomb on Mecca and get rid of the Kaaba. That would end Islam. And I remember the first time he asked me this, we were just standing there after a conversation, like I said, after a presentation I had made. And I was like, and I think my response was, that's the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Now, I normally do not respond to even relatively stupid questions by saying that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but it was hard for me not to say it. Because I was like, who are you reading that would ever make such an incredible, outlandish assertion? And then he asked it again this last time I was there, just a few weeks ago, and I again very strongly said, you've got to be kidding me. Whoever you're reading, stop reading this person, because they don't understand anything. Well, I was just reading an article, and I wish there was a reference to this, and so I am going to say, this is on the internet. I'll be interested to see if it actually pans out as being accurate. But it is attributed to Dr. Robert Morey. And here's what it says. First, as I wrote in my book, How to Win the War Against Radical Islam, the war against the Muslim jihadists will be long and costly and will not be won until we bomb the Kaaba in Mecca. Islam is based on a brick-and-mortar building that can be destroyed. They pray to that building 5 times a day, make a pilgrimage to it, run around it, kiss a black rock on the wall, then run between 2 hills, and finally throw rocks at a pillar. What if that building, the Kaaba, was destroyed? They could not pray to it or make a pilgrimage to it. The old pagan temple of the moon god Al-Ilah is the Achilles heel of Islam. Destroy it and you destroy Islam's soul. There is the quote. No reference is given. That bothers me that no reference is given. But since obviously this is floating around and people are reading it, may I comment briefly upon this assertion? First of all, no one who actually understands the Islamic theology believes that anyone's praying to the building. It's the black stone is what the Qibla points toward, not the building. The building has been torn down and rebuilt many times. The last time within recent memory, just within the past 30, 40 years. It's not the building. The building is not what is sacred. It is the black stone. And so, while you might destroy the black stone, the point is the Kaaba itself is not the focus. And so, there is a fundamental misunderstanding at that point. Was there an idol to a moon god in the Kaaba? Well, there were about 360 idols. Some stories say that there were even images of Jesus and Mary in the Kaaba. One story is that when Muhammad had the idols removed from the Kaaba, that he was asked about the images of Jesus and Mary, and they weren't destroyed. They weren't kept there, but they weren't destroyed. That would be consistent with Surah Maryam anyways. But the point is, might there have been a moon god idol in the Kaaba? Well, I don't think there's any reason to think there wasn't. And there was probably a sun god and stars and all sorts of other things. If you've got 360 idols, you got to come up with something for 360 idols. Is it true that the pilgrimages and the circumambulation, the Laf going around did they pre-exist Muhammad? They did. Did he make changes to those things? Yeah, like you have to wear clothes. But were they pagan ceremonies, pagan things prior to Muhammad? They were. The answer provided by Islam that these actually went back to Abraham and, at least in the traditional sources, Ishmael, and that the Kaaba was built by Abraham and in traditional sources Ishmael as a place of worship. I don't think there's a meaningful shred of historical evidence of that. And the idea that, Muhammad was restoring something, please don't expect me to buy that. But that's the Islamic understanding. Now, is there some connection between the moon god and Allah. Well, not in Islamic theology. Might there have been people at one point in time that identified a God similar to Allah with the moon? Well, I'm sure there was. I mean, anybody who... The whole reason I've never bought into the moon god stuff is because it's a two-edged sword, and I have preached for a long time that you need to be consistent in the arguments that you're using. And the name El can be found in all sorts of pagan religions, just as it's found in the Hebrew Old Testament. So does that mean something? El, Elohim, must be interpreted within the context in which it was used. And just because a pagan used El or Elyon or even Elohim in a pagan context really means nothing. Unless you're just trying to prove pure reliance and pure borrowing, which would be pretty difficult to do in regards to the Old Testament in light of the emphasis upon monotheism. And this is exactly what modern scholars are doing. This is one of the things I was arguing about when I did the long series in response to the LDS scholar just a few months ago. Actually, 6-8 weeks, something like that, on the blog. So you have to be careful. And the question is, are Muslims bowing down to a moon god? Well, no, they're not bowing down to a moon god. They don't believe that Allah is a moon god and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So, when it says, what if that building, the Kaaba, was destroyed? They could not pray to it. They're not praying to it. They're praying to toward the Black Stone. Or make a pilgrimage to it. The old pagan temple, the moon god Al-Ilah, is the Achilles heel of Islam. Destroy it and destroy Islam's soul. Well, if those are the words of Robert Morey, then shame on Robert Morey. That does deserve one of the stupidest statements of all time identifications. There's just no question about it. You nuke the Kaaba, and you create 1.5 billion radical Muslims. They don't need that. It could be rebuilt someplace else. It would unify them like nothing else in the world would ever unify them. It is the dumbest, stupidest suggestion I've ever heard anyone ever make at any time in my life. And if Robert Morey made it, shame on him. How dare he? What foolishness. But I don't know that he did. I would like to get some evidence that someone, in fact, somebody, I'll bet you dollars donuts, somebody listening right now would be able to tell me. Okay. All right, thank you. But I still need a reference. I'm getting commentary from people who knew him that said he had said this many times. But I would like to see real documentary evidence, honestly, of something like that. Because I just am left stuttering at something like that. I truly am. Is Doc in channel? Yes, I am in channel. Turretin, the great Turretin fan has given me a link, and this is live. And here is the statement. Dr. Robert Morey, PhD, Islamic Studies. This is Faith Defenders. That's his website. And there is the exact quote. There it is. This is faithdefenders.com/news/OsamaBinLaden.html. By Dr. Robert Morey, PhD, Islamic Studies. Not sure where that came from, but anyways, first I wrote my book. Yeah, there it is. The old pagan temple, the moon god, Al-Ilah. It's Achilles heel of Islam. Destroy it and destroy Islam. So, well, okay. Thank you very much, Turton fan. And there we have documentation. You might say, boy, you're really slow on this. I have never read anything that Robert Morey wrote on Islam. I just haven't. And I'll tell you why. Since it's out here now, let's go ahead and explain it. I listened to his debate with Shabir Ali, and I was mortified. Mortified by his behavior in that debate. I remember this was this is 2005, because I was preparing to debate Shabir Ali. And I remember very clearly that the first time I listened, I was riding, what's Bell Road? When it goes around the mountain out there? Sun Valley Parkway. I was riding the Sun Valley Parkway. And I was way out the far end of it, and I was mortified. And I listened to it again a second time while riding South Mountain. And I just determined, in light of what I heard in that debate, I'm not even going to invest my time to read, look, anything. I did have a friend tell me once that after my debate actually right before my debate with Shapiro-Lee, that he had contacted Dr. Morey, and he said he wouldn't be attending because I would just be repeating his information anyway, which is not the case. In fact, on Islam, the primary sources that I have relied upon, and some people might fault me for this, but the primary sources I have relied upon are all Islamic. I mean, it sort of bugs people. They ask me about such and such a book and such a book, and I go, haven't read it. I'm working through Bukhari or Muslim or reading Ibn Ishaq or I'm getting stuff from Brill on the early canonization process of the Hadith literature, and listening to various, not only Shabir Ali, but others as well. And that's been the primary source. There are a couple of people that I do consider to know Islam like the back of their hands. And they may not be liked by the Muslims, but the Assyrian Encyclopedia, Sam Shamoun, knows Islam. He knows his sources. And that's you Muslims, you don't like Sam, but you know why you don't like Sam? Yeah, sometimes Sam's in your face. He's more in your face than I am. There's no question about it. Assyrians and Scotsmen do not debate in the same way. But I love Sam. And Sam and I butt heads. We butted heads recently. We really did. But we still love each other. Despite the fact that I don't always agree with how he says things. And I hope I have been somewhat of moderating influence on him. But there is nobody who knows the sources like Sam Shamoun. And that's why you don't like him. Because you're not necessarily consistent in your use of those sources. You've got your little view, and he keeps poking holes in it. That's why you don't like him. That's all there is to it. Anyway, but the primary sources I've used, I've never used Bob Morey. When I listened to that debate, I just went, boo, I don't like that. And the main thing I didn't like about it, and I've said this on the program, we played it in the program, I didn't think I was going here today, but we'll get to the calls. Just a second, Mike and Gregory, we'll get to you in a second. And dividing.line via Skype, if you want to get on via Skype. What really bugged me, and it's bugged me again recently, and I guess that's why this probably bubbled up subconsciously, and I ended up doing this. Actually, it was an RSS feed that I was just looking at my Google Reader, like I frequently do before the program, and there was this thing, and that quote was in it, and I went, wow, I felt it was necessary, given that I have publicly said that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, now that I know where it came from, to say something about it. It's just I think I'm not looking to get into a spitting fight with anybody, to be honest with you. And Bob Morey has sort of disappeared off the face of the planet as far as I can tell, but I'm sure that this will get some type of response. But what really bugged me about the Shabir-Ali debate has been reinforced by recently, it was Sam that directed me to the recordings that have been posted of his debates with Jamal Badawi. And I really, really wish, Muslims out there who know that I can do respectful debates with you that are meaningful and are communicative, I want to debate Jamal Badawi. I really do. I know he's not doing that much anymore, but if any of you have contact with him, would you let him know there's someone that he could do a meaningful dialogue with, a meaningful debate with, where he would not be treated the way he was by Bob Morey? Because I listened to the two debates that they did, and I just listened to them just recently. And the same issue came up in both of them. I guess the Badawi debates took place after the Shabir-Ali debate did. Do you remember what the issue was, Rich, that I brought up? The thigh and the thing? You do remember? Yeah, okay. Here's what happened. I should have queued all these things up. I actually have them on my Mac in the other room, but I didn't because I didn't think I was going to be discussing this. But, hey, it's live, and that's how it works. I don't remember how it came up. I know that Morey brought it up. But he claimed that in Sahih al-Bukhari, there is a text that says that while one of the companions of the Prophet was riding with the Prophet, that his clothing moved in such a way that he could see his... Now, Now, I've looked this up. In fact, one of the first things I asked my Arabic tutor to do was to translate this for me and to show me the Arabic. Because one of the first things, I think it was the second or third week we got together years ago. And the Arabic and every printed edition I have ever seen. Now, Morey claims that he has a printed edition where this isn't the case. I have a hard time believing this, but hey, typos happen. But the Arabic and my edition says that he saw the whiteness of his thigh. It says it twice. And my Arabic tutor showed me the Arabic. The Arabic term is the same in both places. It's very clear. According to Bob Morey, it says he saw the whiteness of his thing. T-H-I-N-G. That is his sexual organ. Well, Shabir gets up, and, I've come to know Shabir. I've debated Shabir 4 times now. And we've communicated about some other things, like arrogant candor. And Shabir's a nice guy. And Shabir does behave in a particular fashion during debates. I mean, he's taken Christians apart in debate when they're not prepared. But he has never behaved in debate with me the way that Robert Morey debated in debate with him. Okay, let's put it that way. So in other words, we have a Muslim who has behaved a whole lot better in his debates than I felt Bob Morey did against him. And he gets up and you can just tell he's like, what on earth are you talking about? And he goes to the text, he says it's the same word, and here's the word. Well, Morey gets up and he says, I don't speak Arabic, but I have an Arabic expert in the audience. Does it say thing? And you can you have to turn it up real loud. And, yes, it says thing. And it's like, what? And then he did the most amazing thing I've ever heard in a debate. And we've played it. We could go back. I've got this in my iTunes. I could play it. I almost feel like playing it. But what's that? Yeah, that's right. On the 24/7. Just keep listening to Dividing Lines the next couple of months, and it will play through at some point in time. It may be 3 o'clock in the morning, but it will play through. There's no 2 ways about it. He actually said, now if I said that I saw the blackness of Shabir's thing, what would you think I was saying? He said this in the debate. I played this. And I just about rode off the road. I could not believe this was happening. It was bad enough because he's wrong. W-R-O-N-G. He's wrong. But he would not back down on it. It was bad enough in the one debate. But what has blown me away is just a few weeks ago, I was pushing, get as many miles as I could to make my 9,000 for the year. And so I was doing these big long rides. And so I listened to these 2 debates between Jamal Badawi and Robert Morey. And evidently, because this is such an easily documented error, the Muslims were passing out documentation on this, demonstrating he was wrong. And so guess what came up again? And if I recall correctly, I could be wrong about this, I think it came up in both debates because it was on one day on 2 different topics. But once again, he would not back down. And I was watching the videos, and he even put up these were in the days of the old overheads, He even put on the overhead a transparency. I would love to see that transparency. I could barely make it out as a 320 by 4, this is a real small 320 by 240 screenshot type thing that I could get it. You couldn't really make anything out on it. But I just could not believe that anybody would go to the mat. This was a hill to die on. And he was just simply wrong. W-R-O-N-G. And what bothers me is to hear him saying true things about who Christ is, at the same time combining it with this kind of stuff and the kind of behavior. Because when he kept complaining about what Jamal Badawi was, well, he just gets up here and instead of giving a positive presentation, he just responds to my book. And I felt like saying, don't quote me, bro. I felt like I was experiencing once again when I got up and I'm debating Dan Barker, I responded to Dan Barker's published position. That's what you do in a debate. Well, that's what Jamal Badawi did. He responded to the published position on the subject of the debate that was in print from Robert Morey, and Robert Morey spends the first 5 minutes complaining about ad hominem and all the rest of the stuff. You're not supposed to be doing this. And I'm like, it's your book. It's the position you've enunciated. What do you expect him to do? I about rode off the road a few times and just went, okay, well, I have honestly tried as best I can, no matter who I was debating, even when I debated Nader Ahmed, who is not really in this particular universe, okay? I mean, it's a different plane of existence, you know? But even then, I try to demonstrate in my behavior and in my interaction with the other person something that can be contrasted greatly with what I saw in that. So, anyways, you pulled the microphone over, and that normally means that you have a comment to make. No, you don't have a comment to make? No, you don't have a comment to make. Okay, all right. So, let me just say that thank you, Turretin Fan, for pulling that up. But the idea of nuking the Kaaba is dumb. It's based on a misunderstanding, and is just simply the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I've said that publicly before. Now I know where it came from, so I'm just trying to be consistent.
Thank you for making your way through that. I warned you ahead of time, A, that it would be long, B, that it would be full of anecdotes and showmanship and self-serving type of statements meant to entertain so that you don't change the channel. Just going to provide a little bit of background for those of you who are new to the whole thing. Dr. Robert Morey, in the year 2002, wrote a book, and the book was called Winning the War Against Radical Islam. Eventually you get to chapter 8, and it is called It is Time for Tough Love, okay? And basically it outlines a plan for counteracting Islamic terrorism that, if America will consider putting it into place, perhaps we can save lives, property, things of that nature. And during the 1940s, you remember the Japanese, they were willing to disembowel themselves, they were willing to commit hara-kiri, as in suicide, in order to kill as many Americans as humanly possible. That was an effect. The underlying cause that motivated the behavior was a philosophical framework, in particular a religious worldview, which is called Shintoism, which, without getting into a big lecture on Eastern occultic paganism, it simply said, your emperor is divine, and if you will simply die in the servitude of this emperor, you will enter into a state of nirvana. Muslims would call it paradise. Basically, something good's going to happen after you die, particularly if you die in battle for the advancement of this cause. Ultimately, we had to drop weapons of mass destruction on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to let them know we were serious, that we weren't screwing around, that if you screw with the United States of America, there will be a response, there will be a retaliation, so you better think twice about it going forward. When the Japanese surrendered, one of our requirements was that that emperor had to go on the radio and announce to the Japanese people that he is not divine. You see, he is not a manifestation in the flesh of the great cosmic energy field or blob. He's just a regular dude. And so what that did was it hit the religion. Thus, that branch of the religion that interpreted the teachings in a wooden literal sense that you must die in its cause, there was no more cause to die for. And guess what? We've had a pretty peaceful relationship with Japan ever since. Okay. When you think about that, and you look at Islam, people who are willing to die, blow themselves up, whatever, in the name of and for the advancement of Islam, it seems like people this insane have nothing that they care about that you could use as a bargaining chip. that you could use as leverage to try to corral this behavior or to put some kind of boundary on this violence. Well, Dr. Morey, who has been laboring at this subject for decades, in the plural, on a scholastic level that Johnny-come-lately Jim White has not, he has come to the conclusion that there are a couple of cards we can play that will actually give us a strategic advantage. Islam is a religion that is utterly and tragically dependent on various sites that are physically located in such places as Mecca, Medina, and Israel, that if these places did not exist anymore, the religion that's so dependent on them would go away. So you think of ancient Judaism. There was a rigid interpretation of the Torah, the prophets, the writings, etc., that demanded temple sacrifice in the temple. In 70 AD, when Titus and the Roman army destroyed that temple, guess what they couldn't do anymore? They couldn't go to the temple to do the temple sacrifices. So the brand of Judaism that existed, that demanded temple sacrifices and things like that, vanished from the earth. That's why in any city in America, you walk into the local synagogue, the local temple, it's a place that if Moses could walk into himself, it would be unrecognizable to him as having anything to do with Judaism. There are no Jews on the planet anymore who hold to a raw, rigid, literal understanding and view of the Torah. They won't even deal with the prophets anymore because Messiah that they're foreshadowing sounds too much like the historical figure Yeshua that the nation conspired with Rome to have killed. Even the American Jews to this day will vote for the Democratic Party that hates Israel. I mean, that's how bad off things have gotten, you see. But the point is, when you destroy the sacred sites, you go for the jugular, you go for the heartbeat of a particular worldview. That worldview, at least that branch of it that's more rigid in its interpretation of its holy writ, vanishes. So Morey's idea is that if Mecca, if Medina, if the Dome of the Rock were removed from the planet, that school of thought within Islam that demands rigidly a pilgrimage, there's going to be no place to have a pilgrimage to, and they're going to be gone. You'll still have a understanding, concept of Islam that has survived, the same way there's a concept or understanding of Judaism that has survived post-temple destruction, but it won't be the one that's causing death and destruction and murder and rape and blood and burning all over the planet. So he's saying, hey, we have this card. We can simply say, look, if you screw with us again, we will light up Mecca. We will light up Medina. Israel will help us and we'll work together to destroy the Dome of the Rock. Either A, this becomes the greatest behavior modification device of all time, where the Islamic terrorist thinks twice before putting his sacred sites in danger of being destroyed by the United States. Thus, you're safe because they know there's a consequence. Or B, if we're put in a position where we have no choice, that branch of Islam, that school of thought within Islam goes away. This is logical, and this makes sense. It's based on scholastic studies. It's based on the primary source reference works in which the religion has been systematized and defined. And it is based upon history. So that provides you with sort of a background as to the context of the question that Jim White is seeking to deal with. Now, I'll get to the objective, which is my literal handling of pretty much almost every sentence he spoke, except for a few. I mean, he got certain names correct and things. But before I get to the objective, I got a few subjective things I need to say. Subjective means, well, not the opposite of objective. It means your opinion, your gut, your feelings, whatever you want to call it. So the subjective must be regulated by the objective. So my subjective opinions are not to be received as scripture or anything like that, or as even fact. They are my educated guess based on many things. But since Jim White got away with calling people stupid and things like that, I should get away with at least providing a subjective examination. In Acts chapter 18, the historical narrative shows us that the Apostle Paul, as a way to pay his rent and food and things of that nature, he made and he sold tents. By day he preached the gospel, and by night to support himself, basically, and to eat, he made tents. Well, when I'm not taking this mic and spitting truth for the constituency of the ministry God has given me, during the day, I'm a salesperson. I'm charged with the duty of entering into the art and science of, through persuasion, negotiation, communication, manipulation, whatever, reaching out to a person and via various trade secrets, creating in that person a demand for a product that they did not roll out of bed that morning thinking, I need this, blah, blah, blah. But I have to somehow plant it in their mind and in their heart that not only do I want this, but I need this, and ultimately if I don't acquire this, I'll be making a mistake. I have been around the block. I've done this in various industries, various companies. It's always been a success, but in terms of sales, I will tell you this. I have that art and that science down pretty well. And when I sit here and I listen to Jim White pontificate, if you will, flow, talk, I'm hearing a classic sales pitch. It's a sales pitch, all right? It's a 24-minute sales pitch. It's very clear that his audience is twofold. On the one hand, you have people who are new to the Islamic studies movement within Christian apologetics. But on the other hand, you have people who have already been involved and who've been doing it for a while, Islamic studies within Christian apologetics. To the people who are new to this discipline of Islamic studies, he's saying, look, welcome to this area of study. I'm already here. I'm already established. I've been doing it in a while. Matter of fact, the more you do your own research and your own thinking, you're going to run into the name Robert Morey. But I want you to know, prior to ever touching anything he's ever written or said, that he's too stupid and doesn't know what he's talking about. And if anybody's the authority, it's me. But to the people who've already been here and been involved in Islamic studies, even way before Jim White himself gave a crap about Islam, he's saying basically, Robert Morey is then and I'm now. Okay, Robert Morey was 20th century Islam. In the 21st century, I'm the man. I'm taking over. He's went insane. Forget him. Let him go retire somewhere. And you will buy my books now. You will buy my CDs. And you will buy my debates now. That's ultimately what he's saying here in this sales pitch. That's my subjective opinion. Now, in terms of the objective, let's dissect what he has said here.